That's an excellent question. So is there a natural corrective nature within the system? And in natural systems, you would say yes. So in a natural system, let's just say in a lake trout herring system, if you have a decline in forage base, lake trout, they're a slow-growing, long-lived fish. They can just hang around. They'll eat less and grow less, and they'll just be a fish that maybe they won't spawn that year. Maybe they'll take a couple years off. So in natural systems that have co-evolved, they manage that system where they can take the lean years and they can respond accordingly. Unfortunately, in Lake Ontario, we've got this system which is partly natural, but a lot of it's been disturbed. These Chinook salmon, they're on a train. Think of them as a high-performance car. They are going to eat and get big, spawn, and die. They can't decide partway through, I think I'm going to hang around for another couple years and I won't spawn. They're on a trajectory, and they can't just sort of slow down. So the velocity of the system with Pacific salmonids like Chinooks and Coes, because that's how they've evolved, they're working hard to maximize their size and their forage. So it's uncertain whether we're going to see those kinds of corrections. We haven't seen them in the upper lakes. I mean, when the alewife were gone, the Chinook basically, they're still there, but they did not sort of take a rest for a while. They basically got knocked right down. So it's Lake Ontario is complicated by the changes that have happened out there over time. Question?
Is the sea flea part of the food chain? We never had sea fleas before.
Yes, alewife do eat spiny water flea, fishhook flea, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm just going to talk just briefly about how the prey fish program works, just to give you some comfort. We got 3 major vessels. The Ontario Explorer commissioned in 2010, the Seth Green out of New York, and the Kehoe just recently commissioned a few years ago. These vessels all working together at the same time, using the same types of nets on the same protocol. And so now we've got a situation where they're out all rowing together. So these are the kinds of fish that we're finding in Lake Ontario. You got alewife, you got sculpin, you got some herring in here, shiners, you got some smelt up here, sticklebacks. You're going to have gobies in there as well. We've got deep water sculpin coming back in. They thought they were extinct and they're re-emerging. It's pretty impressive. So there is a diversity of fish. But 9 out of every 10 fish in the lake is an alewife. So while we see diversity, we are getting tows like this. There's Toronto in the background, so this is south of Toronto in about 350 feet, 400 feet of water, right out near the border. That was a record haul, 10 minutes on the bottom. So you do get huge concentrations of alewife sometimes, and all the boats working together to do the survey. I think Vince, were you out on? You went out. You went on a ride one time, and yeah. Jerry, you wanted to, but it just didn't work out for you. So this is what it looks like. Net's out the back. You got a couple trawl doors that pull the net apart. Here's a little computer device they tow behind the boat, and there's computer devices on the net, and it talks to them, just like I forget what you call it, the Dipsy Diver technology you can use. Yeah. So it's like that, and you can find out what your sweep is and how far you are off bottom. So it's evolved a long way from putting an angle thing on your cable and figuring out what the distance is or feeling the bottom. So they know where they are. You're looking at the distance and the speed and the time, the sweep, how far the bottom is, and timing it on the bottom, and it gives you an area swept. So it's very computerized and standardized. And we do a whole pile of tows around the lake. So this was just coverage in the U.S. waters, and we used to estimate the status of alewife based on that. This is what it looked like last year. It looked similar in 16 and 17. We've been adding some trawl lines. U.S. sometimes picks up this area. Explorers down in here. We can't yet trawl in this area. If you've ever fished off the Bonnet Shoals, it's rock. And so, you just put a net down, rip it, put another net down, rip it. So we've been trying to find trawl lines where we can get in these areas, but we're still pretty confident with the coverage. This year we actually expanded and went up into the Bay of Quinte to see if the alewife were hiding up in there at that time of year. what you're going to see now is this is just where the age 2 fish were caught and from year to year. So the size of the bubble is the relative amount of fish that were caught. The little red X's are trawls that got 0 alewife. A lot of the alewife, this trawl starts in the first week of April and runs through April. The alewife live deep in the winter, and they're in winter habitat still in April. And so as that water starts to warm up, as you know, it warms up pretty darn quick, those alewife will move into shore relatively quickly. That's why we're on the water in early April, and we need to get our trawls done before temperature gets to a point those alewife start moving in. But you can see that even in the near shore along New York, we're not getting alewife. We've got trawls with 0 alewife, which, you know, a month or even 3 weeks later, you might have so many alewife around your boat. That's because they move in relatively quickly. And in the first week of May, you can start to see those alewife in the inshore. So what's striking about this is the spatial difference year to year on where the alewife are. So the first year we went out, that was that record trawl I showed you. Actually, they got it here. I thought they were out here. That was that big sausage that I showed you in one of the pictures, right there. We didn't get many alewife on our side. Last year, most of the alewife were on the 17, most of the alewife were on the US side. We go out this year, most of the adult alewife were on the Ontario side, sort of mid-lake. If we were only relying on the New York data, the alewife estimate would have looked a lot different, just calculating it based on this and just sort of putting that across the whole lake. So the point is, we got one of the best alewife surveys right now within any of the Great Lakes in terms of coverage. We've got a great team working on it. So we're pretty confident with the status of our prey fish. And the guys are getting ready to get out there again April 1 this year, weather permitting, and they'll be back on the water. Status of alewife, the structure is currently dominated by young fish due to those poor year classes. There's a whole fish still in the system, but it's mostly very young, 2 and under. We had an excellent year class in 16, lower than expected survival, below average in 17. The young age structure and the low abundance will likely persist for the next few years. So those fish have to put on their beef, survive, and then we need to get additional recruitment. So we're going to talk a bit about Chinook salmon, and then we'll kind of come back to alewife. So I know you're a lot of hardcore Chinook fishermen in the lake, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know about Chinook size. They were smaller in 2018. You know, we do a Credit River Fall Spawning Condition Index. We had the lowest conditions since 1989. That's saying something. So they go out and they sample the fish during egg take, and then we take length measurements and we look at the condition of those fish. The lowest since 1989. The reduced size, we've seen small Chinooks before, and it has been typically highly correlated with cold seasons. Cold springs, cold winters, and a cold growing season. We saw it in 14, 15. It's not, we had some coldness getting out of the gate, as Colin described, in the spring, but then it warmed up. So I'll talk in a bit. It's not fully explained. There may be a cold factor here, but there's something else we think that's going on. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah, it's a statistically valid sampling method, right? So it's how biologists assess a large sample of whatever. You take a number of samples until it's not changing anymore, and it just creates a statistically valid estimate within a range of error. So it's actually a calculated estimate with a range and error. And there's always error with everything, unless you count every single one, but that's not possible. So they just sample enough so they can get like a 95% confidence that they're within that range. And that's just the way that scientists estimate any population. I mean, you know, Jer and Mike and Brian would be the ones to elaborate on that, but that's sort of the fundamental principle of biological sciences, trying to estimate populations. We do that with moose and deer and everything. So, anything, Colin?
They're not all taken into one sample, and efforts made to take representative samples across different sizes. So it's not just whatever's in the top of the bucket in the first trawl. So.
Yeah, what else, I guess, just to highlight this, the reason I'm confident in it is because of the consistency in the data. We do it here, and then we're seeing consistent trends in year classes, we're not seeing, crazy errors where we had this many fish and then we had 3 times as many here, or it didn't exist. You're seeing the consistency in the reporting year to year is strengthening our confidence that their age class structures are really robust.
But when you're judging a lot of decisions on age structure, it is important to take into account their location in the lake, which that showed really well. You can almost predict that, because 2018, they were battling ice. It was a late spring in the world of an alewife, where much earlier spring in 2016 would explain why those fish were already on the move to spawning grounds. And that's why in 18 you still see them out around the border and in Canadian water, because they're still in winter mode. And they actually prefer that. They prefer winter mode because they're easier to get them. They're on the bottom, super deep water.
So it will be interesting. We only have 3 years of the whole lake survey. It will be interesting to see what 10 years looks like, or 6 years, if there is a predictive pattern to alewife distribution. I'm not seeing it yet. I wish I could, but maybe it's there. Because even with the lake-wide acoustic survey that we do in the summer, we're not seeing a predictive pattern on that. Every year you go out and it's different. And it's like, well, why is it like that? And it's like, what's driving it, right? And these alewife aren't swimming around. They're not homing in on an area. I don't even know if they have any sort of site fidelity, like meaning a Chinook salmon that wants to spawn here knows it's there, but do alewife just go anywhere in the near shore and spawn, or do they actually have they're probably not. They're probably
I don't think they do.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
For Alcott Harbor, which we watch closely, there's years they skip it. There's years where it's stable and warm and they're there. So I think they move around based on where they're going to survive.
So we're learning lots more about alewife, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, at what point does the decrease of alewives alarm us and we have to take different measures to either stock alewife or decrease stocks of others?
Yeah, so stock and alewife is probably not an option. We've been asked that before.
Because they're in lots of lakes, right?
Yeah, so there's still millions of alewife in the lake, right? So there's still millions of alewife in the lake. We did some back of the napkin math a few years ago when we were asked about stock and alewife. And in Ontario, we have 9 hatcheries. If we converted all 9 hatcheries to alewife production, kicked all the other fish out, if we could figure out how to do it, first of all, because alewife would be hard to raise in a hatchery, we could raise probably enough alewife to feed Lake Ontario for 2 weeks. Because if you think of the size of the hatchery, right? So it's like, so that's not on. The only other thing we do is try and manage the predator demand on it.
Okay.
So we're getting to that. But no, it's a good question, because it sounds intuitive, right? Can we put more in? But
Yeah,
you think
at what point is it alarming to us?
yeah.
That's
So
what I'm asking.
I think we're alarmed now, but we're not panicking or anything. We're taking measures. So I'm going to show you some of your data. This is your Great Ontario Salmon Hunt data, results since 2006. So these are the average weights for the weekly 70. So these are the 70 fish that are weighed in for the whole summer. This is the average weight, almost 31 pounds. It's 30 and change, very close to 31 pounds, has been the average weight of a winning fish in the GOSD since 2006. This is the average of that summer, and this is the range. So that means we had 2 recent years of 40-plus pound fish, and these are the lowest fish that won in that year, and with the average. So you got it? So it's been moving up and down, but hovering around the mean right here. We had these big years here, right? You all remember the years 2010 to 2013. We had 40 pounders. You had to have these 2 years, all fish on the board, and this one were over 30 pounds. So we had a few years there where a 30 pounder, it had to be 30 to even be on the board, or the high 29s kind of thing. Then we got into this period. These are the 2 cold years, 2014, 2015. Glenn Anderson sent me an email, Lake Ontario's broken. And it was like, what's going on? Because 15 was a crazy year. Couldn't find the fish, and when you could, they were small. They were all like teenagers. So huge variation. You had little tiny fish, 24 pounders on the leaderboard, and you had the odd fish in 35-pound range. That always happens. But you can see that this is skewed more towards the small fish. So you had a few big fish in there, but the average was down. And we thought this was pretty interesting. And then this year happened. So this year, you know, we had some pretty small fish, the smallest average in the cycle here. And what we found in previous years, I'm going to overlay this with temperature data. This is mid-lake surface temperatures, so it's not fancy, it's just temperatures at the red can. It's an indication of how much energy is in the lake. You can think about it as a metabolic indicator. If I took your temperature, it would be an indicator, but not a whole assessment. Generally, when the temperature is moving up and down, the Chinook growth is moving up and down. They're an animal whose metabolism is subject to their environment. And they're going to find the optimum temperature to grow. And in these years, it looked pretty good. Then we had a couple of cold years here, 14 and 15, and look what happened to the size of the fish. We were not concerned at this point. We saw a temperature effect, we saw small fish, we weren't overly concerned about it. Temperature went back up in 2016. We saw a response in the fish. The next year, similar. This year, the average temp was up here, and we got this going on. So we start seeing a convergence of what we would expect. And that's a cause for concern. Something's going on here. You would not expect to see this happening. This dot, if it's related to this, now it's more complicated, it should be up in this neighborhood here. Yes?
The Chinook is not a surface fish, and you're measuring surface temperature.
It's an indicator of heat in the water column. If you have 70 degrees on top, it's an indication of what is happening in that water column and the depth of the thermocline and the overall energy in the lake. That's what the surrogate is. And this is a mid-lake temperature, so it's not affected by near-shore storms. It's out in the middle of the lake. So it's just how warm is that lake getting? So that's one way to look at this. The other thing is, this is from New York State DEC. I just pulled off one of their graphs. This is the size of an H3 Chinook. Now, this is out of their angler creel. So they actually age these fish on the bench. And this is where they ended up this year. So they saw smaller fish as well. This is just reinforcing the fact that you saw smaller fish. We're seeing it in the derbies. We're seeing it in our independent assessment information. And we also go and collect fish. This is a picture of the Ganaraska. This is a wild Chinook run. We collect Chinooks at the Ganaraska and at the Credit River. And this is the Credit River, the lowest since 1989. That's our lowest condition. The bottom just dropped right off.
You have that for the Ganaraska?
I can get it. We've only been collecting data on the Ganaraska for 3 years. So
There's a real lot of evidence that we're getting a lot more maturity at younger ages.
there's some indication that Chinooks are aging or maturing earlier in Lake Ontario. Mike, you would agree with
not
that.
argue that.
Yeah, Mike,
We
you
don't
would
know
agree.
if we're getting a bigger, in last year's case, it's for sure the case, a much higher percentage of wild fish out there.
Yeah.
But whether that's what's driving it or it's the pen fish that get such a fast start, in my opinion, it's worth it because the survival's so much better. But there's something causing a lot more fish to mature earlier.
Yeah, so this is independent of age. They just take a fish at a certain length
Right.
and they say, what should that fish weight be? So it's a length of fish at the weight of a fish at a set length. And they're not even looking at age. There's all kinds of information we could get into on what is the aging of the fish and are they getting younger and smaller in the lake? And that whole conversation is out there.